my name is Patricia Stucky. I live in the Galapagos Islands. I work as a guide in Galapagos. And I want to share a little bit of my experience with all Canadians who are watching this video, which was made through the Ecuadorian Embassy, thanks to Diego Stacy. And I hope you enjoy it. I got to the Galapagos Islands 25 years ago, exactly in May 1996. And I fell in love immediately. I went diving here and it was amazing on my first dive. So I saw Hammerhead Sharks and everything. So they offered me a job as a dive guide and that was it. I was hooked to the islands. I live on Santa Cruz Island. That's the most inhabited island here. It's not the capital, that's San Cristobal. But I live in the highlands of Santa Cruz and I enjoy my life here and I enjoy guiding very much. But the underwater photography, I really started through a coincidence. It was at the very end of a dive that I was in the safety stop looking down and I saw something bright yellow. So I went down again, I had enough air in my tank and I picked up a camera, a CNC Motor Marine at that time. There was a camera with film, old times. And I couldn't find out who the owner was. And so that was my first underwater camera. Since then, of course, the equipment has changed. The good thing nowadays is that you can have a normal camera and for most of them you can buy a housing. It's something like this. This is the housing that I have for my camera. So you put your camera inside here, you have an O-ring around and then you close it, make sure that there is nothing in between, no hair, nothing. And there we go. You take pictures underwater, snorkeling or diving. They can go quite deep, those housings. So highly recommended. This is the most famous species of Galapagos, the Galapagos giant tortoise. There are only 2 places in the world where you can find giant tortoises nowadays, here and in the Indian Ocean on Aldabra. So this picture of the juvenile Galapagos, Galapagos means giant tortoise, by the way, I took in Urbina Bay. That's in the west of Isabella Island. And it just crossed my path. It was actually on the trail. We have to stay on the trail. The tortoises don't have to stay on the trail. They can go wherever. So I was fascinated because it's very rare to see juvenile giant tortoises in the wild. You usually see the big ones, but not that much the little ones, the small ones. In that site, Urbina Bay, I have seen giant tortoises even eating bones. So I thought it was not possible. There was a bunch of bones from another giant tortoise, in fact, and that giant tortoise started to crack them and swallow them. So I found out that if they have a deficit of calcium, for example, they eat bones. So every time I go out guiding, I can learn something new. It's amazing just in observing the behavior of those animals. Giant tortoises exist on all of the bigger islands. Isabella is by way the biggest, consists in 5 islands, in fact. So they grew and grew those islands and now they stick together and it's one single island and they have 5 species of giant tortoises. Here in Santa Cruz, we have giant tortoises. In fact, on my little plantation I have in the highlands, I have giant tortoises. They stroll all over the place. So it's really the species you have to see when you come here and you're going to be fascinated by them. This is a Galapagos sea lion and they are probably the most playful animals that you can find here on the islands. And people, they always come with the idea, oh, giant tortoises, but they leave with the idea, wow, sea lions, they are the best. If you're on land, they are sometimes very curious, come up to you, toward you, or when you are in the water and they feel like to play, they do exactly what you see on this picture. He was just swimming up to me, throwing bubbles. And then at the very, very last second, he turns off. Usually when it happens to people for the very first time, they scream because the sea lion just swims up to them and then turns off and they get scared. But they are the funniest animals that you can imagine. Not the big bulls though. Go away when you see a big bull that comes up to you doing a sound very typical like, oh, 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 oh. then you just go away because he's defending his territory and his girls, let's say. But the little sea lions, they're very playful, extremely playful. This picture I took also in the west of the archipelago. It was on Fernandina Island, where we have a huge nesting site of marine iguanas. And when the marine iguanas lay their eggs, they get very weak, they get very exhausted because it's a lot of work to dig a hole, to fight with other females, to lay the eggs, to cover them, to be at the nest for about a week. By the time they are done nesting, basically, there is hardly anything left from the marine iguana, and they are very, very easy prey for the Galapagos hawks. What you see there on the picture is a juvenile Galapagos hawk, and he got that marine iguana. But the sea lion came up and he said, no, I want to eat that marine iguana as well. So he was in front of the hawk, and the hawk basically chased the sea lion away and ate the marine iguana afterwards. This is a baby sea lion in this case, and a very lazy baby sea lion. This picture was taken at Puerto Egas, or James Bay, as we call it as well. And we just got on land. It was early in the morning sun was hitting the rocks there. And on top of one of the rocks was this little baby sea lion having a snooze. And they don't get disturbed by human beings, in fact. They don't even care about us. And if they do, it's usually curiosity. Obviously, in this case, not. He was too tired to get up. Here you see the feet of a Bluford Booby, one of the most famous and emblematic species here in the Galapagos Islands. Even though they are not endemic here, you can find them on mainland Ecuador as well. What are blue feet for? Well, what are blue eyes for? Probably you don't know, but they are actually for sexual attraction, and that's exactly what blue feet are for as well. When they do the courtship, they lift their feet, they show each other the feet, and they do what we call sky pointing. And then the partner, the potential partner, figures out the blue of the blue feet. Because if it's this blue that you see here on the picture, that's an attractive blue. That's the clear blue that indicates that this bird has a lot of sardines to eat. So it's a healthy bird. It's one that's going to be able to find food for the chicks to raise them. If the blue is reddish, that means that bird has not had that much food lately. That could be because no food is around, but it could be as well because he was reproducing recently and gave most of the food that he was fishing to another partner's baby. So he would not be an attractive potential partner. These two Bluford Boobies, they are in courtship, and the courtship, also called sky pointing, what they do is very funny. First of all, they show each other the feet, they lift them and make sure that their potential partner sees them well. And then what they do is the sky pointing. They point towards sky with the tail. You can see the cocked tail there. And then they point towards sky with the beak and with the wingtips, basically. So it's like, and then the male whistles, and the female, she has a funny sound. It's like, wah, but they do it as well. So that's how they figure out if they like the other half or not. This iguana on a Palo Santo tree or an incense tree, I took last year, just before the pandemic, in North Seymour. And it's very unusual to see that. Usually they don't climb trees, they eat vegetation on the ground. But we were at the end of the dry season, which means there is not much vegetation on the ground, but it had started to rain a little bit already. And the incense trees, they really are the first ones in making leaves, producing leaves. So this iguana just decided, well, I climb up the tree and get some food up there. Incense trees, by the way, are frankincense. You might know that a little better, that name. They are used here, for example, they burn the wood in the church, and that's the incense of the church. Hence, Palo Santo, holy stick. On this picture, you see a Pacific green turtle. That's the most seen species here in Galapagos of turtles, of sea turtles. They nest here as well. And you can basically see them all over the place. And it doesn't matter if you dive or if you snorkel, you have just to be at the right place at the right time. And sometimes there are a lot of them. In this case, I loved the light. There was scuba diving up north at Darwin, and we were out in the blue in the water, and the light was just falling on the turtle, and I loved that situation. On this picture here, you see another turtle as well underwater, diving. I was diving, not the turtle. And it just came straight up to me. And that's something I always try to communicate people when they visit the Galapagos, mainly in the water. It's not about chasing the animals and take a picture. Be patient and wait for them to come up to you, because every single animal, including us, is curious, and they eventually come up and check you out. That's exactly what that turtle did. I even had turtles, they would crash into the housing because they thought, well, in that case, they probably thought it was a jellyfish to eat. But the animals in general, they are so curious. This is a school of eagle race, and I took this picture at Wolf Island up north, the very north of the archipelago, where you actually only dive. And they always pass by there. But I assure you, you can see them snorkeling a lot as well. We see them all the time, even just from the dinghy. You can observe eagle rays. They are black on the back and they have white dots. And down below on the belly side, they are white. And in this case, there are 7 of them with a check in between. They are passing by. At the very same spot, I took this other picture. When you dive in Galapagos, you often just sit on the rock or lay on the rock or hang out there. And then you wait that wildlife passes or comes up to you. And this is the case here. I was just holding my breath and waiting, and this eagle ray came up to me and he almost kissed me. This is a typical picture that you would see or take up north at Darwin and Wolf Island. Big schools of hammerhead sharks. As well in the Central Islands, we have sites that you can visit where you can snorkel, dive and see hammerhead sharks. Sharks in general, they have a very bad reputation, but I think by now, most people know that the bad guys are really us, because we kill about 100 million sharks a year just for shark fin soup. And sharks, they kill by accident about 7 people a year. So I think it's completely out of relationship. The whole shark populations in the world, they are down at less than 10%. So it's very, very sad. We cannot even imagine how the seas looked like years before we started to study them and destroy the wildlife inside. But our islands up north, Darwin and Wolf, they are actually now a shark sanctuary, and there are hardly any extractive activities there. And so you still can go up there and see those schools of sharks. And by the way, another point is, and that's in most marine reserves in the world and here in Galapagos as well, those species, they don't stay inside the marine reserve. And that's when they run danger. So they go, for example, to Coco Island that belongs to Costa Rica, and to Malpelo, which belongs to Colombia. And so it's a triangle. And what we are working on right now is actually to create corridors for those sharks going through, because otherwise between those archipelagos, they are fished out and killed and end up in a soup. This is an ocean sunfish, or Mola Moles, as they are called as well. And they live in great depth. In fact, this is the biggest fish in the world. I know you're going to say, no, it's the whale shark, and that's true. But whale sharks, or sharks in general, they don't have bones, they have cartilage. This is a fish with bones, and so it's the biggest one. The biggest one they've ever found, and unfortunately as bycatch, that was in Australia at the beginning of the 1900s, had 14 feet across from one fin tip to the other. The animal itself looks very, very strange. They belong to the family of the tetradoniforms, pufferfish. So when they are babies, actually, they look like little pincushions. And as they grow, they are just a big disc with hardly any tail, some little eyes, and then the 2 big fins. So they look like a millstone, hence mola, that is millstone in Latin. So we have a site here in Galapagos. It's in the west of the archipelago as well, at Punta Vicente Roca, just below the equator line actually on Isabel Island. And that's where the Mola Moles come up and get cleaned. I remember when I started diving in the Galapagos, you hardly did see any Mola Mola there. The first one I saw was after years, and it was like, wow, the big experience. And now dive groups go there to see the cleaning stations of the Mola Mola. You can see their little wrasses, and sometimes it's the angelfish as well. They go up and they just clean them up. Mola Molas, they have a very thick skin. And in fact, they have a lot of parasites. They have more than 40 genera of parasites. So their parasites have parasites. So they need a cleanup once in a while. Otherwise, they live down at over 1,000 meters depth. And that's why you hardly see them usually. I hope you liked this little show and this little talk about Galapagos. There is much more to see. And I assure you, every single week I do a tour is different. And every single week I learn something new and nature tells me something new. So I would like to invite you to come to the Galapagos. And the good news is we are in full process of vaccination. I had my first one. Next week I have the second one. By the end of this month, latest in June, the idea is to have everybody here on the islands vaccinated. So it's the safest you can get, in fact. To come here, you have to do a test, but I invite you, come and enjoy nature.